Hi, I'm Landon, and in this video I'll be giving you an overview of all the blocks in the looks category. We'll start off with the say hello for 2 seconds block. We can change hello to whatever you'd like, so I'll go and change it to Code Ninjas. Now he'll say Code Ninjas for 2 seconds. We can also change 2 to 1, and now he'll say Code Ninjas for 1 second, or we can even change 1 to 0.5, and that would be half a second, and that also works. The next block that we'll be looking at is the say hello block. Now, of course, the difference between this one and the one that we looked at before is that there is no specified time for this message to be displayed. So when this block is run, he will just say hello forever. Alright, so next we have the think blocks. Now, the think blocks are very similar to the say blocks. The only real difference is that the speech, they have a thinking bubble instead of a speech bubble. But that is the only main difference. Alright, so we talked about the say blocks, the think blocks, and now we'll look at the costume blocks. So we have switch to specific costume and then going to the next costume. Now, of course, when they're talking about costumes, we can go to the costumes tab, and these are all the costumes in the sprite, in the cat, right? So I can say go to costume 2, which is actually the one he is currently on. So this is costume 1, right? And then I can say to go to costume 2, and now he's on costume 2, right? Or we can just say go to next costume, and that will just go to the next costume in the list, and once it gets to the bottom of the list, it will loop back. So in this case, when I run the next costume block, it kind of looks like he's running. So those are the costume blocks. Next, we will talk about the background or the backdrop blocks. This is going to change the backdrop in some way, right? So much like the sprites have different costumes, the stage has different backdrops. So let's add a couple backdrops into our project so we can demonstrate what those blocks do. We'll add this one and just another one. Very cool. So now we have 3. We have the blank backdrop, the blue sky backdrop, and the castle backdrop. Okay, so now in the code, if I say switch to backdrop blue sky, then it will go to the blue sky backdrop. We can also have it go to the castle backdrop, or to the previous backdrop, or to a random backdrop, just like that. And then next backdrop works pretty much the same way that next costume does, but it just changes to the next backdrop in the list. So we'll start at the blank backdrop, go to blue sky, then castle 3, and then loop back to the blank backdrop. And that's what next backdrop does. Next, we will talk about the change size and set size blocks. Change size, when they're talking about size, they're talking about this property here. So I can change size to 200 like that, and now he's twice the size that he was. Or we can change it to 50, and that's half of 100, so that's half the size that he was, and so on. But with these blocks, you can do that all in the code. So we can set the size to 50 here, and we'll basically do the same thing as changing 50 here, but we can do that during the game, during it being run. Or we can change size by 10, or even a negative number, negative 10, and that will make him smaller, just like that. The next block that we'll talk about is the effect blocks. So there's 3 of them. So we can change we'll talk about the set block first. So we can set the effect to a so there's a couple different effects. There's color, fisheye, whirl, pixelate, mosaic, brightness, and ghost. And let's say I change color by 50, then you can see that the cat is let me increase the size of the cat so we can see him better. You can see that the cat is changing colors, right? Or we can change, we can add a fisheye effect, and we can increase that fisheye effect by 25 every time I activate this block. Or we can set fisheye back to 0. That undoes the effect. Or we can double click clear graphic effects, and that sets all of the effects back to 0. So now he's back to normal. You can, I encourage you to play around with some of the effects. There's a lot that you can do with them, and there's a lot of different effects that you can use. But for now, we will continue to go down the list. The next in the list are the show and hide blocks. These are pretty self-explanatory. If I double click and activate the hide block, then now the sprite or the cat is hidden, and if I activate the show block, now you can see the cat. These are very useful and used quite often. And next block in the list is the go to front layer. What this does is, let's say we have another sprite, and now if you look, the cat or the basketball is in front of the cat's face. We're like, we can't see his face. So then we can use this, go to front layer, and now he's on top of all of the sprites. Or we can have him go to back layer, and now he's below all the sprites. That's what that block does. We can also bring him forward by 1 layer or back by 1 layer. So what basically this does, and how this is different than the last one, is instead of him going to just directly above everybody, he just goes up by 1, and he's above 1 sprite at a time, instead of him being immediately at the top of everything. So there's just some options there, and that is basically it for all the blocks in the looks category. There's a couple of these here, and basically what you can do is you can use these during if statements or when you're checking for other conditions, and basically this returns the number or the costume number, right? And this returns the costume name. So currently we are on costume 2, so this will return 2, and that the name of the costume is costume 2. So then it will return costume 2 when this is activated. And it's the same for backdrop, right? Right now we're on backdrop, I think 3. So this will be 3, and it's castle 3. And then size is referring to the property size. So if this is 50, and so we're 50% our size, then this will return 50. All right, that will wrap up our video on the blocks and the looks category. Hope you join me next time, and we'll talk about the sounds category. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.